Okay, let's go ahead and get started. It is so good to be with you today, and it's good to be with you in this conference. I love the UEMA conference. I think this is the ninth UEMA conference I've been to, and it's been something that I've really enjoyed over the years. I've been doing emergency response with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for the past 10 years, and it's been something I did not plan on in my life. I didn't go to school to do this. The opportunity just kind of came, but it's one of those things that I am so thankful that this has been a part of my life, because I've had the opportunity to get to know so many of you. As I look out in this room, some of the people I have the greatest respect for in this world are in this room. Some people that I just truly love and appreciate and I just admire. You know, I know really most of us, none of us go into this profession to get rich. That's not why we do this job. But one of the things I've learned from you is that you go into the profession you're in because you care for people. And this is really about people, the business that we're in, and in taking care of people. And so I can't say thank you enough for what you do and what you have taught me. I'm kind of sad because over the last 3 years, my assignment's taken more of an international turn, and I spend less time in working with Utah. And so when I come here, I'm really glad to be able to see so many of you, because I don't get to see you as much as I used to during the year. Thank you to Sheila and your board and everyone, your committee who's helped to plan this conference. And the weather's cooperated just like last year. It seems like we have pretty good timing with that. So Sheila's asked if I would take some time today and share with you some lessons that I've learned on my recent trip to the Philippines. As you know, back in November, it's been 2 months ago yesterday, a powerful typhoon, one of the strongest storms ever recorded, hit the islands of the Philippines and caused significant damage. And I went over about 4 days after the storm hit and spent 3 weeks there. And like this disaster that I was involved with there, I learned so many things. And you kind of learn those same lessons again and again. It's amazing how quickly we forget some of the things that we learn, and we have to relearn those. I guess that's why we have conferences like this, is to relearn those lessons. And again, I apologize that this is in PowerPoint format. I think it was Mike Sievert, probably, when did we go back to DC as the county, or to, not DC, to Maryland, or Pennsylvania? It was like 2006, 2007, but the first time I heard the term death by PowerPoint, I think you used, Mike, and it's kind of what we feel like sometimes after a long conference is death by PowerPoint, but it sometimes is a good medium to share pictures. So on Friday, November 8th, 2013, Typhoon Yolanda, which it is known as in the Philippines, they have their own naming system, or Haiyan, which the rest of the world knows it as, made landfall in the central Philippines, excuse me, as a Category 5 storm with winds of more than 200 miles an hour, causing extreme damage to the islands of Leyte, Samar, and Cebu, Negros, and Panay. Okay, the Davis County windstorm 2 years ago. How strong were those winds? What was the biggest gust we got? 104 miles an hour? Yeah, I thought the roof was coming off of my house. I stayed up most of that night just listening to the shingles peel off of my roof and hearing things. I live in Bountiful, hearing things, hit the house and 100, I think we were getting gusts where we were 100 miles an hour. It was probably closer to 80 to 90 during the nighttime. And waking up, it looked like a war zone. It really did. But 200 miles an hour, that's hard to imagine. That's sustained winds with wind gusts up to 235 miles an hour. It's like a tornado that just doesn't stop. Anyway, this storm is one of the most powerful ever recorded. There is significant loss of life and severe damage to buildings, infrastructure, and agriculture. And if you look at the storm there, it's a huge storm. The storm actually is bigger than the country of the Philippines. And one of the things that made this storm so unique was how tight the eye was. Just such a very tight eye. This is what CNN was reporting the day before the storm hit.
This is probably one of the top 12, so the top dozen of all storms ever seen on this planet with a satellite or in person. That's how big this is. It is not as deep as Gilbert and Wilma in the Atlantic, but the wind speeds are higher than those storms because the eye is so small. This is just the most incredible picture I can show you. That this eye right there, it reminds me of Andrew slamming into South Florida as the eye of Andrew got smaller and smaller. Now, Andrew's eye was the most important part of that storm because that's where the big winds were, 150, 160 miles per hour. This storm is Sandy size in width. This is the entire country of the Philippines. And so there's a lot of bubble here. There's a lot of water under this storm. There's going to be storm surge, 50, maybe 60 feet. All the people along the eastern shores of the Philippines will be moving out and getting to higher ground as a Cat 5 hurricane, 175 miles per hour. Right now, they're thinking, they don't fly planes into these storms out here. They're thinking about 190 miles per hour right now, and it'll still be 150 when it moves south of Manila. Now, that's the good news. The forecast is south of Manila by 150 miles. There still will be damage in Manila, and there's still an awful lot of people out here. The biggest storm, even this is smaller than the one that's going to hit tomorrow, killed 1,900 people in 2012. And it hasn't been a good year for the Philippines. Look at all of the storms that have crossed that nation. It has been ugly out there, and this is the biggest one of the year so far. So that's why we say it's always typhoon season, even though there comes an end of hurricane season out here in the Pacific. Yeah, sure. The waters stay warm, and it can be a typhoon any month of the year, Susan.
Chad, is there anything, in light of the fact that we've got this warning, we know it's coming, is there anything that people can do there? Because I imagine that the damage could be extraordinary if people don't pay attention, at least don't prepare for what is going to hit them.
Well, the good news is, if there is any, is that this area here is not as populated as Luzon up into Manila. This is where the real densely populated area will be. We will lose people no matter what you can do. This is almost at some point for some people on these islands an unsurvivable storm. They want to get on the opposite side of the island if they can, because all the upslope will make all the rain and there will be massive flooding. The winds, if you get a wind at 175 or 190 miles per hour, it doesn't even matter what kind of a building you have. It's going to sustain some damage. It's get low and stay out of the water. That's the big thing right now.
So that was what CNN was reporting the day before. We knew we had a big storm on our hands there. In the Philippines, just to give you a little background, this is not a religious presentation, just so you know, but I will use reference to the LDS Church several times throughout my presentation, so I hope I don't offend anybody by that. But as part of my job, it's to help take care of our people wherever they're at. And we have approximately 700,000 of our church members in the Philippines. And so we knew we had a lot of our missionaries over there and a lot of our church members who were in harm's way. And so this storm hit on a Friday. On Tuesday, when we first started hearing about this and learning of the magnitude of this storm, we're getting on the line with our area leaders, telling them to get in contact with all the mission presidents, all of our bishops, stake presidents, telling them to get the word out to take the warning seriously, because this is such a huge storm. The Philippines experiences about 20 typhoons a year on average, and most of those in the category 1 and 2 area, but this is a big one, and so we knew there were going to be deaths and damage. Let me just show you some of the pictures. It's hard to really capture the magnitude of some of these storms unless you're there, because when you're there, you get the smells and the sounds, and it's different. Now, let me go back here. You've all heard of storm surge. This is kind of what and it's hard to imagine what storm surge is like. It's like a mini tsunami. But I'll show you the storm surge here in some of these areas. And storm surge can go in a couple of miles. storm surge that killed most of the people. Most of the people who were killed in the Philippines lived along coastal areas. And they're the ones who said, we'll ride the storm out. They've done this 100 times before, but the storm surge was the thing that was different about this one. That's what was different about Katrina and some of those storms that take people by surprise. They figure they can, withstand the wind, but they're not expecting that storm surge. And that storm surge was as high as 15 feet, a mile inland. And it just comes kind of gradually, builds up, and people find themselves without any place to go. This is almost a mile inland, so you can see the power of nature. People seeking shelter, anywhere you can, and you see that's about 15 feet there. This is one of the most devastating things from the storm over there in the Philippines, is these islands that were hit. It's a big area to produce coconuts. And they estimate more than 22 million trees are down, coconut trees were leveled by this storm. It's really interesting. Some of them just are knocked over. Others, it's like somebody took a chainsaw right at the halfway point and cut them off. And I know some of you who have been down to Katrina saw some of that same damage. It's just the trees were completely bent over. One of the great experiences I had in this event was I was able to travel with a reporter and a photographer from the Deseret News, Jesse Hyde and Ravel Call. And I have a whole new respect for what reporters and photographers do. They take their job seriously, and they have to meet deadlines. I know we all have to meet deadlines here, but it's interesting to watch them meet a hard deadline. But the photographer, Ravel Call, he captures some amazing images. This is about 10 days after the storm here, but you can see it's just, there's some concrete structures that stood, like that house there. But others, everything else is just completely gone. Okay, current situation. This is as of yesterday, but approximately, there are at least 6,200 deaths are confirmed, with 1,785 still missing, with more than 28,000 people injured. Now, in our shakeout exercise, I want to try to, bring some of this home to Utah here. But in our shakeout exercise, Judy, when we estimate a 7.1, are we estimating about 7,000 people would be killed for that? How?
3,000.
3,000?
Yeah, it's about 2,100.
So even in some of our, earthquake scenario here in Utah, we're estimating it in the 3,000 area of people being killed in a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. And this is a serious storm here. More than 10 million people in 44 provinces. Provinces is similar to a state or a county were affected. More than 4.3 million individuals were displaced. How many people do we have in Utah? Not quite 3 million, or 2.7 is it, or something? Some of our state people to know. So more than the whole state of Utah has been displaced. And I was trying to figure this out the other day. More than 600,000 homes were completely destroyed. And that's probably about how many homes we might have in the state of Utah if you were to take a look at individual households. Anybody know that number? It's probably 500,000 to 600,000, I would imagine, if you look at number per household. But that's like every house in the state of Utah being destroyed. Gives you a picture, an idea of what that might look like. And this, an additional 500,000 receiving varying degrees of damage. There are still shortages of clean water, food, fuel, and other basic necessities. So it's been 2 months, and the situation is gradually improving. Some of the priorities there are certainly restoring power and water systems. It'll take months, literally months, to restore some of these things. And there are still safety and security concerns. Status of our members, and again, this is just to give you an impact of what we're dealing with. But we had 20 of our stakes, 17 districts. A stake is composed of about 2,000 people. During the storm, during the day before and the day of the storm and the day after, we had approximately 15,000 people seeking shelter in 200 of our church buildings. And so they were packed with people, but it ended up being a very safe place for them. We try to build our churches to a very high and safe standard. And so in some of those smaller towns, they're some of the safest buildings, and nobody in our church buildings was killed. And so we were grateful for that. We lost 42 members of our church in this storm. One of the things that's interesting, and I hate to throw numbers out like this, but is since the Haiti earthquake 4 years ago, that's 4 years ago tomorrow actually, in our church we've lost approximately 350 members to natural disasters, and that's more than the previous 150 years combined. It's an interesting statistic when we look at that.
Storm out.
Was that lightning? Oh, wow. Okay. Maybe I should stop right now. We should all go home. It's interesting. I don't know if anybody went to the National Bow Conference a few years ago, but when we were there in Kansas City, we had a tornado warning. We all, ran to the shelter. That was kind of an interesting thing to be together as that group. Pardon?
Not the real shelter. We went to a room like this.
Yeah.
They put us in the wrong place.
I shouldn't tell you this, but when the siren went off, I had to go grab something from my room. So I went up to my room on the 20th floor, and the sirens are going off. Please, if you're in your room, go to your bathtub. And so I went to the bathtub and put pillows on me, and it got really boring after about 5 minutes. So I went to the window and was watching this. I'm just really dumb. It was not smart at all. So, but I learned a good lesson there. That I should have not even gone to my room, and I got scolded by many, many people. Okay. We have many of our church members who have actually left the affected area, gone to Cebu, Manila, and are actually resettling there simply because they lost everything. They don't have anything left. We have called what we call transient bishops. This is a bishop who's called to help people who really don't have a permanent place to stay. And so we have one in Manila, one in Cebu, and their job is simply to try to help people find housing, help provide them food, and help get them a safe place to stay. One of the things that was interesting, and this is part of my lessons learned that I'll share later, but we have about 20 units, what we call wards, in that affected area that the leaders simply don't have a way to get around to find. We're one of the things we've learned is we ask our leaders to go out and do these assessments almost immediately. How many people are affected, how many church buildings are damaged, and yet we sometimes forget that their home is destroyed. Their car, most of these people don't even own a car. And we're trying to have them go out and do all this thing and, things so we can have information at headquarters. And it's really not fair for us to do things like that. We have to remember how some people, police officers, those first responders, they can't even get out those first few days in these areas because they're affected. Their families, they have missing loved ones. And that was a good reminder to me. One of the things we did within that first week is we went out and purchased 20 motorcycles, more of a scooter, to give these leaders the ability to get around. It was hard to get around that first little bit because of, blocked roads and things. And that allowed them to go out and minister to their people. So one of the lessons I learned there that I'll state at the end of the summary is to think outside of the box. And that's not something on our checklist, is to go out and buy motorcycles, but it's something that we saw there was a need of. And it was a suggestion from, a local leader. We need a way to get around to do this. This is another picture that Ravel Call took. This was on a transport. The Philippines military and the U.S. military were transporting people out. They had the C-130s. They would come in about every 2 hours and were taking people to Cebu and Manila. And this was on one of those planes that we flew out on after being there for a few days. And this is one of those families. And everything they have on them is what they have. So many of these people just simply lost everything. I'm gonna skip that. That shows. Let me just show you that. One of the things that's so interesting about this storm is how many islands it affected. The Philippines is made up of about 4,000 islands, but there were 5 big islands that were impacted severely. Those red dots represent some of our church buildings. So our church buildings, we had 168 of our church buildings in the path of the storm. 62 of them sustained damage. 18 of them sustained what we call major damage. So this is very something that you see all over the place. This is damage, the kind of damage you see, roof damage, but many of our church buildings experience this kind of damage where they're made out of concrete, so they withstood the winds okay, but the roofs are completely gone, and so you have these open roofs, and so as you go into some of our churches, this is what it looks like looking from the inside. Okay. Yeah, one of the things that was different about this storm for me is our missionaries. We had 204 missionaries in the Tacloba mission, and you may have remember seeing the news a few days after. We were only able to locate 100 in the first few days, and it was a challenge to locate all of them, but that's how I spent most of my first few days there, was still working on getting people out, not necessarily going into the area.
It was nothing like I had ever experienced before. We saw just undescribable amounts of destruction.
The whole world is responding to one of the strongest storms on record that hit the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan.
We saw the water rising up the side of the house. I had never seen a flood before in my life.
And for a group of missionaries of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints laboring in the Philippines Tacloban mission, they lived through it, holding on to anything they could, including one another.
For those that were really struggling, I think it was the first time that they finally relaxed and had that hope that they were going to make it.
When you consider the sheer intensity of Typhoon Haiyan, actually finding more than 200 missionaries scattered throughout this ravaged land was a daunting task for church leaders and members who love it.
You'll be a lifelong member. Sister Andrea! Nice to see you! They had become, for a moment, part of my flock and part of the flock of other people that were trying desperately to make contact with them.
This whole operation, everybody was guided into finding missionaries. There have been some miraculous stories of just things that happened at certain times that if they'd happened a bit later, things would have been missed. So yes, it was a guided operation, definitely.
We would be searching for them and focused on a specific area, and suddenly we would receive a telephone call from one of their leaders who would put a telephone in one of the missionaries' hands, and they would report to us right there who had been found, who was with them.
My heart was aching for these parents who didn't know where their children were. And every time we would find one, we were immediately on the phone with those parents to say, we've got another one.
Here in the city of Manila, at the Missionary Training Center, the facility served as a gathering place of safety for missionaries who were relocated following the typhoon. For missionaries who found themselves with just the clothes on their backs, missionaries in neighboring missions heard about their needs and began donating supplies.
Shoes, dresses, shirts, t-shirts, gym clothes, regular clothes, anything.
In addition, the church replaced lost items such as scriptures, shoes, clothing, and other needs.
After seeing the destruction in Tacloban, you didn't really, the clothes that you had on your back were enough. And so to get here and to have people selflessly donating, giving me the clothes off of their back because they knew I didn't have any, was just overwhelming.
But their missionary service hasn't come to a sudden end. The missionaries have been reassigned, for now, to 11 different missions throughout the country, with hopes of one day returning to the cities and communities they've grown to love.
Your personal attributes or the way you are, it really has an impact on others. That just going around trying to make others happy, it has a big impact on them, and also it makes me feel happy that they are happy.
Actually, one of the hardest things for me to watch was having these missionaries come in. None of them wanted to come to Manila. They all wanted to stay there and help. As you can imagine, that was a hard thing for them to leave their assigned areas and be reassigned to a different mission. This picture is actually the last group of missionaries coming into the area office. Although they were relieved to be there, they were also very sad. You can see in this one, it's the area president's wife giving each one of them a hug. And what they have with them is what they brought. That's all they could get out of them. Most of them went to church buildings to seek shelter during the storm, and a lot of them could never make it back to their apartments. We actually just got the first 2 missionaries back into that mission this past week, and it'll take months to reopen. This is that mission before they were disbanded and sent out to reassign to new areas. Some of those missionaries saying goodbye. Okay, communications. One of the things I did, we have 3 satellite phones located in the Philippines area. I took over 10 with me when I went, and we were able to get those out with our security teams and other teams that were going into these areas. One of the hardest things with this situation was communications, because they actually had found most of our missionaries, but they had no way of communicating it back. And one of the things we found with satellite phones is they are not always dependable. Yeah, it's a good and also knowing how to use a satellite phone. They're so frustrating for so many people. They want to use it like a cell phone, and you know, so many people who haven't done that, they get very frustrated. But so local church leaders in areas with no means of communication have been provided with a satellite phone. So we try to get satellite phones, at least one, into each of these areas. And then we set up a satellite-based internet communications system at our command center in the Tacloban area. And we were able to do that within about 8 days after the storm, which was so helpful, because communications were difficult. I love this picture because this is the satellite communication system that we set up at our stake center there. But we got this set up, and those are actually cement slabs on the bottom of this to hold it in place. And we put a little rope around it, but within 15 minutes after putting that rope around it, it was being used as a clothesline, because we had about 400 people who were seeking shelter in that church building and who are still there. So I just thought that picture was really funny. And right here, behind this little thing, okay, this is Doug Renier. Doug, raise your hand. I just want to give a special shout out and kudos to Doug Renier. He's our communications specialist. And when he learned that I was going over, you know, I only had a couple hours notice. They said, we want you over there. And I called Doug and said, Doug, can you get some satellite phones ready? And what we call a comm center. A comm center is an office-based satellite system. And he got this all put together for me, and I got it dropped off to our headquarters and got that set up. And it was great to be able to set that up and call out. You can use it just like a regular phone. It's so cool. So thank you, Doug. Just a quick summary of our relief efforts. To date, our church members have assembled food kits, hygiene kits, and other things. We've provided approximately 1.5 million pounds of food and other supplies, including food, water, blankets, hygiene kits, clothing, cooking supplies, water purification units, and other basic supplies. And we've been trying to provide those. You know, most of the focus has been in Tacloban, but there are 4 other islands that were severely affected by this storm, and they just didn't get a lot of attention. We're trying to focus on those areas too. A few pictures of some of our volunteers. These are cooking sets that we're sending over because most people, don't only have food, they don't have a means of preparing it. So providing the pots, pans, things like that is also important. And if you know that any Filipino, they can't go a day without rice. And so rice is the main commodity that we're providing. Okay. A lot of people ask us how we do our work. And my job, I'm headquarters based. It's not my job to do all the work. I help to coordinate things. I work on approvals, things like that. But we have an area staff, and these folks were working 18-hour days for the first 3 weeks. They were just, and one of the things I've learned also, another lessons learned, is that you've got to take a break sometimes. We were starting to get people, they burn out. You really start to burn out after a couple, 2 weeks time. Has anybody seen that before? Seen people really start to get fatigued and they burn out, and you've got to give them some kind of a break. And that's one of the things that we learned. You almost remove them completely from the situation. It's just not healthy when people are going that hard for that many days. But these folks were doing a tremendous job, and this is how we accomplish our work with good people like that. Many international organizations responded. First of all, I can't say enough good about our United States military. How grateful I am for them. It was similar to Haiti. They were into Tacloban within 48 hours, came in from Okinawa and Guam, and secured the airport, made it possible for planes to land, and those international shipments to start coming in within about 72 hours. USAID, it drives me crazy how often our country gets slammed for different things. But nobody can argue that we're not the first ones in there so often to help other countries, especially the Philippines. The U.S. has a special relationship with the Philippines, and they were right there for weeks after, and just did a tremendous job. I was based out of the airport there for a couple of days, and bumped right next to our Army and Marines and other servicemen, and it was so cool to watch the George Washington pull into the harbor there in Tacloban, and just to watch the flurry of activity. It was amazing. Helicopters landing like every 2 or 3 minutes, loaded up with supplies, and they're going out to remote areas, watching the C-130s come in every few hours, unload supplies, head back out. So it was an amazing operation. Okay, this good serviceman right here, this in the Marine, yes, he's Marines. He was amazing. This is our mission president and a member of our area presidency. But they had about 180 of our missionaries at the Tacloban airport. We're trying to get them out. Nobody was helping them. I mean, there's just thousands of people everywhere. And this young man saw that many of them were Americans, and he said, "Can I help you?" And within 2 hours, they had him on a C-130, and they were on their way to Manila. Many of you have seen this statue before, and this is just south of Tacloban, but this is MacArthur returning to the Philippines. You've heard that statement, I will return, yeah. And that, unfortunately, one of the statues fell in the storm, but it's a reminder of our what so many have given before. There's an incredible memorial, a cemetery in Manila, with the thousands of servicemen and women who lost their lives in World War II in the Philippines, and one of the most sacred places you can ever go. And again, I'm so grateful for these good men and women who fight for our freedoms. Partners. I can't say enough about the importance of partners and knowing who those partners are ahead of time. Okay, I've got here listed, these are not all of our partners, but certainly some of our main partners that we turn to right after disaster, and they turn to us. ADRA, CARE, Catholic Relief Services, International Relief and Development, Islamic Relief, Red Cross, Salvation Army. And I've got 2 Utah companies listed here. Goal Zero. Has everyone heard of Goal Zero? I think everyone has. And Aquamera, or Divi. Max, are you here? Right here. There you are. Okay. And Max, their company, they make water purification units, some big ones, and they're actually next door. Do a little pitch for you, Max, here. But they make great units. We've had some of these units over in the Philippines. We were able to start to use them. Max actually went over there for 2 weeks and helped get some of these units set up, train our people. But we turned to Max and ordered 10 more of these. These are big units that can do thousands of gallons per hour. How many gallons per hour can they do?
Each one does 250 gallons per hour.
Oh, I was hoping it was thousands, but that sounds better. Anyway, that's a lot of water, and it helps a lot. Yeah, they're great. And so these partners, Goals Hero, we turned to immediately, started ordering some supplies because it's dark over there. One of the things that struck me is I went in the Tacloban area, those first few nights I was there, it's so quiet. There's no power, except for an occasional generator here. There's no lights. You see some candle lights here and there, but it's completely dark. It's really eerie. You hear dogs barking and things like that, but you don't hear the hum of a city, which is so interesting. So we're so appreciative of our partners, especially some of our good Utah partners here that do great work. I love watching these ospreys take off. Those are cool. Okay, the needs and challenges. This is kind of universal for most big disasters. Some of the needs that you see: clean water, that's kind of a universal one. Food, medical attention, communications, shelter, sanitation, security, transportation. And so as you make your plans, one of the first things I'll list on my lessons learned is to have a plan. Do they cover all of these items? How are we going to respond? Does your own family plan cover these types of items as you look to plan for your own family? Okay, so lessons learned. These are some of the things. This is not your normal list. This is, a lot of people have asked me over the last few weeks, so what did you learn while you were there? And these are just some of the first things that came to my mind. So maybe not the usual list that you might see, but have a plan and exercise your plan. I think we're all aware of that, but I can't overstate the importance of that. Be prepared with the basics, food and water, to get by for, in our church, we try to encourage people to be prepared. And for years, we, use the term 1 year supply of food. You're never going to hear that term again because it's simply not even a reality for most people. In the Philippines, their goal is to have a 3-week supply of food. If people would even do that, even do half of that, it would be great. Most people still just, especially in a country like that, live day to day. And then there's some things that you just can't plan for. It doesn't matter how much food storage you have when you have a disaster like that, but it may be important that your neighbor has something to rely on it because you never know who's going to get affected. So being prepared with the basics. I look at food stores like insurance. You hope you never have to use it, but it's there if you need it. Heed the warning of civic authorities. So many lives could have been saved if people would have heeded those warnings to get away from the low-lying areas. We even had our bishops going out to some of our members who lived on the shoreline. 40 of the 42 of our church members were killed really within a 15-mile radius. And it's just those church leaders of ours are just lamenting because they went out there, warned the people, and they said, no, we've done this so many times, we're not leaving. And so many of them perished. Know your partners before the disaster. And again, working with those partners. And I love the Dunkin' Donut example from yesterday. Think of people you may never think of working with before. Redundant communications. It's not just enough to have one backup plan for communications. And I'm preaching to the choir here, I know that. But having multiple forms of how to communicate after a disaster and so forth. 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago, after Typhoon Ondoy went through the Philippines, it was a big one, killed a lot of people. But our Philippines area, they talked about implementing a radio system over there. It was going to cost them $20,000, and they just, it's too expensive. And they're just looking back now and just kicking themselves that they didn't do that. And how often do we do that after a disaster, saying we need to do that? And sometimes it's hard to bite the bullet and get those things into the budget. Sometimes you may have to take other things out, but when you have those, I think, lessons that you learn and don't act on them, then we're the only ones to blame for things like that. Let first responders and civic leaders do their job. And that's such a problem sometimes with these big disasters. It's interesting, the people that show up, literally from around the world, they don't have any idea what they're doing there. They, bless their heart for wanting to come in and help, but there's simply no resources in a situation like this, and they come and they take up valuable resources, and that's something I get on my soapbox about sometimes. It's just, again, people wanting to do good, but end up creating problems. This was interesting because you didn't have thousands of people coming in because it was a more isolated area. It was harder to get to that area. But again, let first responders and civic leaders do their jobs. Be prepared to shelter in place for at least 1 week. If you can do that for a week, help will come. But you got to be ready for at least that amount of time, even if it's 72 hours. I know here in the U.S., if we could shelter in place for at least 72 hours, help is going to start coming. This is interesting, and people will do desperate things during an emergency. You often hear about people, the looting and things like that. And, you put yourself in that situation. You don't have any food, water. What are you going to do? You're probably going to be doing the same thing. You're going to do whatever you can to help keep your family alive. And too often, we're pretty judgmental on the other side, saying, "Oh, I can't believe they would do something like that." When you have a situation like that, things are very desperate, and it can be dangerous. And so, being safe, using good judgment is so important. The international community is an amazing group, and I learned this time and time again. That includes everyone in this room. As people come together, the public sector, the private sector, faith-based organizations after a disaster. And it's amazing. I just stand in awe watching these groups come together and being able to work in an somewhat organized way. It takes a few weeks to get things organized. But, OCHA, the various countries, there were planes flying in from Japan, Chile, Israel, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, with relief supplies, all coordinating with the Philippines government, the U.S. government, to deliver supplies in those first critical days. And then watching the humanitarian community come in right after that. Think outside the box. Think to, meet the need, not just what you've got written down on your paper. Just because it's written on your paper, it's something you need to do. Don't focus so much on a checklist, but really try to meet the need. And again, help will come. And I see that every disaster is help will come. Probably one of the greatest things I learned time and time again is people are good, people are kind, and most people, these Filipino people especially, were so resilient. I was just amazed of their smiles just a few weeks after going through some of these terrible things. I've showed this on a couple of presentations before, but I really love this picture. Security is having a few bones stacked away. And that includes preparedness plans and, all those little things we need to prepare for. Okay, a couple of my favorite stories, and then I will end. Hopefully we can get out here a little bit early, but I got to remember this good gentleman's name. Okay. So this is about 10 days after the storm. I'm at our command center and get a call from one of our church leaders saying we've got a lot of their people staying in church buildings who are drinking dirty water. They said, we've been receiving the bottled water. They're very thankful for that. They're appreciative. But, a bottle of water does not last very long. And they said, is there any way we can get water purification units? And we said, we're working on this. We're trying to get them in there. It's going to be a little bit. But I said, we'll see if we can get some there quicker. literally 5 minutes after that phone call, hanging up on that call, this group of 5 people, you can see, they walk in there, and this gentleman named Joe Hurston, he's the president and CEO of an organization called Air Mobile Ministries. He is a pastor out of Central Florida, and they focus on water purification after big disasters. And he shows up and introduces himself and said, "Hi, I'm Pastor Joe, and I've got 15 water purification units that I would like to donate to your organization." He said, we've been driving around a little bit. We see that you have church buildings and shelters open, and he said, we would like to donate these. And I said, great. This is, it was a miracle to me. But I said, how can we help you? He said, we need transportation. And so we got them a vehicle, and they spent the next 5 days going around to several of our church buildings, installing these water purification units, teaching people how to use them and how to clean them and clean the filters. And they blessed thousands, countless lives with these little units that they brought over. Delta Airlines donated the cargo, let them bring them over for free, and it was amazing. They actually hooked up the gentleman in the middle. His name is Aaron. He is a return missionary from the Tacloban area. He's been home for like eight years. He lives in Central Florida. Heard this pastor being interviewed on the radio, called him, said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "We'd love it." He speaks the dialect there, and anyway, it was just an amazing thing, and gained a great friendship out of that. So we gave them a safe place to stay, gave them air mattresses and transportation, and they provided us with a wonderful gift. Talking to the people there is probably the greatest blessing of my life, just being there. We had a team of doctors that came over, not from the church, but from Charity Vision International, a team of about 20 doctors those first few weeks, all from Utah. They did amazing work, going out in difficult circumstances, and I loved watching them work. Okay, I gotta tell you this story. This is one of our missionaries, and I'd actually seen him a couple of times as they came into our area office. But as I was headed out after being there for a couple of weeks, I was at the Cebu airport headed for Manila, and as I went to the waiting area to sit down, I noticed this missionary, and he was as sad and lonely as any individual I think I've ever seen in my life. And I just went and sat to him. I said, "Elder, how are you doing?" And he started crying. He said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I can't do this." His emotional scars. He was one that was in an apartment that the water came up. He watched people literally die in front of him. He said, he can't stop hearing the voices of people screaming, and he couldn't do anything to help them. They were doing everything they could to save their own lives. And he says, I think I need to go home. And I said, "That's okay." And so I just said, let's go get something to eat. And there was a little pizza place in the airport, and he actually ate a whole large pizza. He must have been hungry. But realizing the emotional scars that some of these things can leave sometimes, realizing the value of the mental health people, professionals that are out there doing such good work, the pastors, ministers, and people that I see providing such valuable service. And that's one of the great things we've established here in the United States. It's not so prevalent in other countries, but realizing the emotional scars that can sometimes last for years on these people. And this poor missionary, he's going to take some time to recover. But it was a good reminder to me of how real these situations are to people. And he'll be okay. I got him to smile. I said, "Can I take a picture of you and send it to your mom and dad?" And I did, with a little note telling them. And his dad wrote back and said, "Thank you so much." He said, "We have been worried, sick, ever, since the storm hit." Okay, couple of last pictures. These are people waiting at the Tacloban airport to get out of the area. There's literally thousands of people just patiently waiting. They'll wait for 2 days sometimes there. One night as we were trying to get out on a transport at 8 o'clock, we didn't get on there, and so the safest place for us to be was to stay at the airport, and so we just kind of hunkered down that night right with the military. And it's an amazing what a badge will do sometimes. You can walk anywhere, and people come up to you all the time, "Sir, can you help us?" Or they want questions answered. But one of the things I was grateful for that night is you can hardly sleep because there's just a hub of activity. It started to rain, and people are just sitting out there in the rain, and this lady came to me and said, "Do you have any tarps?" And right next to me there's this huge there's several pallets of tarps from USAID, and I asked one of the military guys, I said, "Is anybody using these?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Can we use them?" And he said, "I don't care." And so I think if you act official, you can do some things too. And so we broke into this pallet of tarps and started handing out tarps, and hopefully kept a lot of people dry that night. But I was thankful I was able to do that. Okay, before I go to that. Okay. So while I was there, this is about 3 o'clock in the morning, this next little video clip. This shows you the spirit of the Filipino people. But there was a guy who pulled out his guitar and started to play for the people. And then this guy from the Philippines military came over and started to sing with him. This totally, completely unrehearsed. Try to brighten the spirits of these people waiting at the airport. Oh no, I stand beside the hallway. Oh, fine. Let me go back on. This goes on for a few minutes. But it made me cry as I watched this, and it just you started to get tingles. I thought, wow, I don't know if you'd see that scene in other places, but it really touched me as I watched that security, that military person from the Philippines, and some guy I totally unrehearsed played it. Is that a Bee Gees song? Does anybody remember that? I thought it was a Bee Gees song. I gotta find that song because I want to hear it. Something about the Bee Gees. One last video to end with, and this just hopefully points out hope and resiliency that so many people have.
It was nothing like I had ever experienced before. You saw just undescribable amounts of destruction.
While church members were warned of the oncoming typhoon, no one could foresee the storm surge that would bring the sea into their homes and threaten their lives.
This is the worst typhoon ever hit us. Everybody's crying, every family, even my family, we're holding hands. Little children are singing hymns, and everybody is scared. Even the leaders are scared.
Following the typhoon, the church opened its chapels and surrounding grounds to provide temporary shelter, basic food supplies, and medical care for people and their families, especially those who were most vulnerable.
Because most of the members here, they lost their house during the heavy typhoon. In times like that, we need to help anybody. To make sure that everybody is safe.
All the things that I'm going through right now, I just trust it to the Savior. I have a responsibility to a larger family than more than my family, more than my own. I have a huge family in the state. One of the saddest things that happened to us were the casualties. And that is so heavy for us.
39 members of the church lost their lives in the storm. Brother Dexter Bendoy lost 8 members of his family.
When the typhoon had plateaued, the strong wind had come upon us. Roof had been blown away and water seeps in. I asked the members to regroup. We went to our room and we knelt down together and we plead to our Father in heaven to spare us. Because of that experience, I learned that He do really exist and He do really answer our prayers. There is this wonderful feeling of camaraderie and as well as brotherhood and sisterhood that we can get through this. My relationship with my Savior had gotten closer. And we are hopeful. There are always good things to come. And I learned that it will come to pass if we'll just stay strong and have faith in Him.
Sorry to again, and I'm kind of religious now, but I wanted to show you the spirit of those Filipino people because they are very resilient. And it was a joy to be able to work with so many of them. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. That's kind of an unorthodox way of sharing lessons learned, but I hope that's okay. That was my experience in the Philippines, and I'm grateful that I was able to have that experience. It taught me a lot. So thanks for allowing me to be here today.